It's round 6 of the candidates, and Alireza Firouzja is facing Fabiano Caruana. He has the white pieces here. What can he do today to bounce back from his -1 score? So he kicks off with pawn to d4. Fabi goes knight f6, c4, e6, and now g3 from Firouzja, so he shows a willingness to actually play the Catalan. What will he come with today in terms of prep? Well, after d5 here from Fabi, bishop g2, bishop e7, knight f3 played, castles, and now castles is the most common move from white here. You can also go queen c2, but Alireza played a very rare move here of queen to d3, so he's come prepared. Now this discourages black taking on c4, then the queen instantly recaptures, decent game for white, but instead Fabi strikes here with pawn to c5. Now there was a master game with pawn to b6, I think it was Ding Loren, preparing bishop a6 here. Maybe this is what Alireza was more expecting, because after pawn c5 he started burning a lot of time very soon in the game, as we'll see. So you don't want to take on c5 here, then black can go here, the knight's coming to c5, the queen looks silly. So instead Alireza just castles the king here. We now had takes on d4 from Fabi, the knight recaptured, knight c6 developing, and now Alireza took in the centre, Fabi chopped on d4, queen recaptures, knight takes, and now it's not so easy here for Alireza to actually get all of his pieces out, keep an initiative, so he goes rook to d1 to start with, but now bishop f6 from Fabi alleviates that pressure on the d file here. Queen g4 was played, looking around the king, but bishop d7 from Fabi, good calm move, and you can't actually win a pawn here. Now you wouldn't necessarily want to be giving up your light squared bishop anyway, but here there's actually an attack on the queen. You'd have to move it away, then you could go say pawn d4 or bishop c6. Good game for black. So we didn't have takes on d5. Alireza went knight d2 here, and he spent 40 minutes on this move, by the way. He just started to get into massive time trouble now in this position. So queen e7 from Fabi, connecting his rooks, and now this knight could come to e4, but then bishop e5. It's not so clear here why white has any kind of advantage. So instead the knight came to f3, leaves the way clear for the e-pawn. So after rook to c8, pawn e4, although Alireza claims some space here, Fabi counterpunches with pawn to e5, hits this queen with the bishop here, so it dropped into h5, and now knight to b4 played. And I was watching the commentary on the St. Louis show today. I really like the stuff that Yasser's doing, and they had Sam Shankland on the show, and he was saying at this position here, black is really a bit better right now because you're first to the punch on the c file. This knight on b4 is better than this one on f3 here, so unless white can drum up some kind of attack here, black is just a little bit better at the moment. So Alireza goes bishop to g5 here. We had captures on g5, it brings in the knight, threatening mate in 1, but of course that's easily dealt with pawn to h6. The knight drops back, and now a nice move from Fabi. He actually just drops this knight back because he's heading for this d4 square in future in many of the lines. And here Alireza, already very low on time, actually makes a blunder in this position. So he should just play something here a bit slower, like say pawn to a3, maybe bishop h3, looking to exchange bishops, get rid of this one, which is technically a bad bishop, looking at its own pawn. But instead he takes on d7 here, going for the tactical line, because after queen recaptures, bishop h3, he's thinking, okay, queen moves, I pick up the rook, but this is where he's just not so sharp right now, because pawn f5 refutes the whole idea, and Fabi sure enough played it, because now if you take with the bishop, which Alireza didn't do, but it was the best move, well then there's queen to e8 here. You've no time to take on c8 or you lose your queen here. If you take the queen, well, we recapture with the rook. You're no longer winning an exchange. So after this bishop f5 move, queen e8, white would have to drop back, queen g4, and okay, the game goes on. Black's got the exchange. White would try and play on the light squares, but should be long term better for black. So instead of taking with the bishop, Alireza actually took with the pawn here, trying to mix things up, but this isn't the best way to play, and Fabi played in a really professional manner here. He brought the rook to e8 here, coming away from this bishop's line, preparing to actually push this e-pawn. Alireza goes knight h4, coming in on those light squares. Pawn e4 from Fabi, looking to come to e3, also frees e5 for the knight. Rook d1 from Alireza, hits the queen. It came into f7 here, offering an exchange, but of course Alireza doesn't want to go down that route, so he drops back to e2, and now Fabi actually picks up a pawn on a2. He can actually safely do this, because although the knight jumps in, there's just not an attack here after rook to f7 from Fabi. So the knight dropped back to f4, maybe coming into e6 one day here. Queen b3 from Fabi, and now the knight doesn't go there immediately, because then this one could actually come into e5. You cover these key light squares, and so instead Alireza goes bishop to g4 first before the knight hits e5, threatening to bring this bishop here, but Fabi goes pawn e3. No time for Alireza's threats. His own king is under fire. If you take here, for example, the rook is crashing through. So instead, Alireza jumps up here, gets away from any checks with takes on f2, and now Fabi goes rook d8, just looking to exchange pieces here, solidify his advantage. So we had takes on d8, the knight recaptures. Alireza now wins this pawn here, but now his second rank is exposed. This could be dangerous. So rook c7 was played, coming down on c2. The king came to h3, coming away from that threat. Knight f7 from Fabi. He's looking to come in here, check the king. That would be deadly, and so the bishop drops back, gives the king some room, but this is all very desperate now from Alireza, playing on just minutes here. The rook came down to c2, queen d1 played, the knight checked here, king g4, and now Fabi can actually just simplify in this position, so he chops off on f3. Alireza threw in this check, king h7, then he recaptures here, and Fabi just calmly picks up this pawn on b2, because also he can now slide back to this f6 square, and that's exactly what we see here. After queen e8 threatening this check, Fabi covers that one. Pawn e4 played by Alireza, holds this pawn. Fabi now picks up on h2 here, and this also starts to set up threats around the king. Alireza goes queen d7 here. They've now made time control, but the position is really hopeless for Alireza here. We had queen c3 check, king g4, and after queen to d2, you're actually forced to exchange these queens here because there's too many threats around the king. Now Alireza didn't do this. He played queen to a4, but then he actually swiftly resigned afterwards. Why did he resign? Well, now you can go pawn h5 check, for example. After the knight recaptures, then we check from e2. The king has to come to f4. Now you can pick up a piece at the very least. You can also start checking the king in all sorts of crazy directions. This is just hopeless for white, completely lost. So Alireza just looks really out of touch when he gets out of his preparation, really struggling at the moment in this tournament, and a fantastic crush by Fabiano, playing that c5, taking it off the beaten track. Really nice preparation from Fabi. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.